All right, so welcome to another episode of Camaro Restoration, and this is unlucky episode number 13. And it's kind of coincidental that 13 being an unlucky number, and what we're going to talk about today and what I'm going to show you guys happened to my car. So I was starting to kind of plan the disassembly of the front end of the car, and one of the things that I've been researching and watching some videos on how to do are those front coil springs, because everyone says, hey, those things are under a lot of pressure and they're really dangerous, so you got to be really careful when you disassemble that front suspension assembly. So I wanted to see the suspension assembly without the tire on it and get the brakes off there and go ahead and take the hub off, whatever, and I could see it in a little bit more detail, put some light on it, and kind of plan how I want to remove that coil spring. Well, first step of that was to take the tire off, and that's as far as I got, because the tire wouldn't come off. So the tire's held on by 5 lug nuts. I got 4 of them off, and there's always one, but I have one lug nut that just started spinning. All right, so when I say spinning, what I mean by that is well, let me back up a little bit. So a wheel stud, as you guys know, is threaded at the top, and then it has those knurls at the base of it. And when it's pressed into the hub from behind, it's machine pressed in there, and those knurls kind of dig into that hub, and that's what prevents them from spinning. And those knurls on the base of my wheel stud broke free, and it's still got a head on it, so it didn't come through the hub, which would have been easy, because then again the tire would have just came off. It just started spinning. So my lug nut is screwed on to the wheel stud, and the wheel stud broke free from the hub, and all I had was a spinner. So that's what I had to deal with, and I had to try to figure out how to get that thing off. All right, so to start out with, what I did was I put a pry bar under there, a big pry bar, and I tried to put some pressure on it and pop it off. No way. There's no way that was happening. Plus, anytime I did that with the front end of the car in the air, all I did was, to kind of turn the tires. Even when I got them at full lock, there was no way I could pop that off. I didn't want to damage my wheel because it's a brand new wheel, and I didn't care about really the rest of it. I was kind of bracing it against the rotor and pushing, but I did scratch up the back of my wheel doing that. I don't mind scratching up the back of it. I just didn't want to scratch the front of it, obviously. But that didn't work at all. So the next thing I tried was taking off, with the 4 lug nuts out, you have some play in the tire, and I tried to get in there behind the tire right by the lug nut. Instead of leveraging on the actual wheel, I tried to get into that space between the hub and the back of the wheel, and you just really can't get in there, and if you do, you barely got it. And I kept slipping through to the front part of my wheel and just slightly scratched it a little bit, so that didn't work either. So I eventually accepted what was coming here, and I knew, based on research I had done and trying to find some YouTube videos on how to fix this without having to drill it out, but unfortunately drilling it out was it was a nightmare. But it's what I spent about the last 2 hours doing, and thankfully I did not film it. I wish I kind of did film segments of it, but I can kind of recreate what I did and show you guys what I did on the car and in a little bit more detail. So let's go check that out. All right, so here's the hub of the car, and you can see the culprit here, and that's this guy right here, and you can see how it's drilled out. And you can also see how it's just kind of spinning, and how it still won't pull through because it has that head on the back. And again, the lug nut came in and was on this thing to the point where it would not. I couldn't break it free. I couldn't do anything with it. So this is what it looks like, obviously, after being drilled out. All right, so this is a normal lug nut. You can see the threads there, and they go on like this with your wheel in between. And these lug nuts have a sealed top on them. And this is the damaged lug nut that I'll have to replace, where I drilled out. And you can see there's a hole in the top of it and a hole there where the threads go. And I don't know how well you can see that, but pretty much all the threads are drilled out of that. Now, the other thing that made this a real pain was because this was loose, and I had to have 2 hands on the drill, putting as much pressure as I could on that to get through it. My wife had to stand here with a pry bar and hold it. Well, she didn't have to. She was nice enough to do that and sit there and hold it. And you can see the yellow paint there from the pry bar on the brake rotor. But she's had to sit there and hold that wheel tight, and then sometimes really, really tight, because it just started spinning freely, so I could drill it out. And then down here is kind of the succession of drill bits that I went in. And I started off with a really, really small drill bit, and I did that intentionally. And the reason that I did that was so that I wouldn't slip off. You're more likely to get a small drill bit and a small hole started than to start off with one of these big ones. And then from the small one, I got a really, really small hole in there. And then I went to the next one, and you can see that one's broken in two because it snapped. And then I went up a size. And then the two that are the same size, I think they're 13/32. I really made some progress with those to the point where I burned one up, and I had two of them. So I started with the other one. And at a certain point, I just wasn't making any more progress. And then I switched to that big one there. I think that's a 1/2 inch. And once I switched to the 1/2 inch after going through the succession of those drill bits, within a couple of minutes, the tire and wheel finally broke free. And then that's what you're left with right there. And that's the pile of metal shavings that we swept up just from that wheel stud. All right, so I know breaking off a bolt like that isn't really front page news. I've done it plenty of times on my Jeep, and I was always able to see the broken stud of the screw or bolt and just start drilling it out. And you know, it's a pain, but they come out, and you can drill them out and either retap the hole or just use a bolt and a washer at the end. But in the case of a wheel stud with a lug nut still attached to it, just spinning like that, pretty unusual. And I just wanted to share with everybody how I went about tackling that. What a pain. I hope that this never happens to any of you guys or anybody else. But if it does, I hope you guys go to YouTube, or I hope someone goes to YouTube, searches for this problem and finds this video, because I think it'll help you. Again, I would skip trying to figure out a different way to do it and just get to drilling. All right, so now that that's out of the way, I can get back to the disassembly of the car and work on getting this subframe, not front clip, John, subframe, out of the car and decide what I'm going to do with that. So stick around, more cool videos to come. Appreciate you guys watching this. Thank you for your support, and as always, thanks for watching.